Hi, Larry here again at Chesapeake RV Solutions. Have Sam, our service manager, here, and with the weather this weekend, this may be a little late, but we're going to let you know how to prevent your lines from freezing up. And we have a lot of full timers out there, and hopefully they've already experienced this. But how can they keep their lines from freezing, Sam?
Well, the good news is a lot of the higher end campers like Mesa Ridge and a lot of the fifth wheels, they actually have a furnace line dedicated to keeping the underbelly warm.
Instead of the smaller travel trailers or fifth wheels that just force heat down into the underbelly.
Correct. Yeah, so they actually have their own dedicated line that really circulates the heat in there to really help keep all of those lines and tanks above the freezing temperature.
What we've had some phone calls today talking about how can I keep them from freezing. They have 12-volt heat pads on their tanks, things like that. Is that going to help them out?
Oh, absolutely. That's an amazing option if it does come with your camper. You can always have those installed after the fact as well.
There you go.
All you need is 12-volt power run down under your underbelly, and you can install those even yourself. You could get into the underbelly and install those in there just to keep your tanks from actually freezing up.
And one thing they can also use that we've kind of sold out of is the heated hoses, but they come in handy as well.
Absolutely.
And you were saying something earlier when I was talking to you about it, about the low port drains.
Right, so while the furnace and these tank pads can keep everything in the underbelly above a freezing temperature, there are certain things that hang outside of the underbelly, which would include things like an outside kitchen or your low point drains,
Oh, I didn't even
things
think about
like
the
that.
outside kitchens.
Exactly. So things like that have water lines and things hanging outside of the camper and the underbelly, you need to really pay attention to those and make sure those are also insulated as well.
With something like people put on their water heaters at the house, that foam.
Right, exactly. Some
Okay.
sort of foam insulation is probably best for stuff like that.
Okay. And for full-time RVers, a good idea, especially I do it at my house. I open up my cabinet door underneath my sink, my bathrooms as well, trying to allow some heat to go in there.
Any habit that you have that you use at home
Right.
during cold weather is going to work in your RV the same way. RVs are just tiny homes on wheels, if you will.
That's what they are. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay. What about people that say they store them at their house, but they leave them plugged in?
So for the people that leave them plugged in, it depends on what you're plugged in with and what kind of usefulness you plan to get out of your camper. So if we're talking about someone that plans to use the camper a couple times during the winter
Right.
with a lull in there, I would tell you to go ahead and drain all the water out of your camper. If you don't specifically want to winterize it, then I would still recommend you leave your furnace turned on so that it keeps that camper above the freezing temperatures.
How about draining the water heater?
That's another excellent point. If you are going to have a long lull in between, I always recommend you drain your water heater anyway, just to keep it from excess corrosion. If you may happen to have an anode rod in your water heater, or even if you don't, it's bad for the water to sit in there for an extended period of time. But if you do use your camper, let's say
Around
every
here, I
week,
mean, you can basically camp 365 days a year, except for a couple weeks where it
Right.
really gets that cold.
Exactly. But if you do use your camper quite often, then I would just recommend leaving your water heater on. Now, if you're hooked up to a full service site, whether you have that at your house or wherever you store the camper, you can leave that water heater on electric, and that obviously warm water will stay warm and not freeze in there. Or if you want, if you have a lower amperage, let's say you're hooked up to a 15 amp circuit, you can easily just leave the propane running as well as the furnace, and that would keep all of your water lines and things like that nice and safe.
Okay. And one thing here, we know there are a lot of individuals that believe in taking the compressed air and blowing all the water out of their unit. And we always have somebody come back in the springtime and they have something wrong and something leaking,
Absolutely.
and so.
So the compressed air is a good way to get most of the water out of your camper. But the places that most of the water is not where the freezing damage is going to occur. The damage is going to occur in the small little areas where it's tightly packed with water, and those areas are also somewhat weak as far as usually plastic fittings or stuff like that, whether it's the valve in your kitchen faucet, whether it's the flush valve on your toilet, or even the check valve on your city water connection.
How about your P-traps?
Even your P-traps, small areas that just contain water that freeze and bust. So we always recommend using the RV antifreeze winterization method, and that involves using your water pump to pump antifreeze through your entire system, and that includes through all of your faucets, down into your drains, your toilet, any fixture. That includes draining all of your tanks, including your water heater, popping your low point drains to make sure that you get antifreeze out of every single fixture, including the city water connection and black tank flush, to make sure there is zero water in your camper anywhere. That is the only way to be absolutely certain you won't receive any kind of freezing damage.
Well, appreciate the tips there, Sam, and just to let you know, here at Chesapeake RV Solutions, we're here to help you create the memories you'll talk about forever. We just really don't want your pipes freezing and bursting to be one of them, but
Absolutely.
thank you and have a great day. Thanks, Sam.
Yep.